Former Vice Premier Tsung Wan-tan is back in court for a third bail hearing after his last release was revoked. NATO promises aid for Ukraine and says the country's path to membership is irreversible. Taiwan's top court is deciding whether to overturn new powers that lawmakers voted to give themselves. Plus, Taiwan scientists believe they may have developed a cell therapy fountain of youth. Good evening and welcome to TaiwanPlus News. I'm Eric Gao. Thanks for tuning in. Former Vice Premier Tsung Wan-tan is back at a district court after his bail was revoked a second time. The DPP politician has been accused of corruption from when he was serving as Taoyuan mayor from 2014 to 2022. Joyce Tsung is live for us at the courthouse with the latest. Joyce, is there any indication if Tsung is going to be released again?
Well, it's still a waiting game here at the Taoyuan District Court. Former Vice Premier Tsung Wan-tan's third bail hearing is still underway, and so far no signs yet as to what the court will decide and also what prosecutors' next moves may be if the court does decide to let him go again. At this point, the well-known DPP politician has paid over $360,000 in bail and has been barred from leaving the country. Now, Tsung, who was once seen as a potential successor to former President Tsai Ing-wen, has been accused of corruption from when he was serving as Taoyuan mayor. And the last time he was released, which was 2 days ago, this district court said that it found no evidence to justify detaining him. But now the High Court has twice revoked his release, saying that the possibility of collusion between Tsung and other suspects has still not been resolved. Eric.
So Joyce, how long can this back and forth go on for?
Well, without new evidence before a trial starts, this could go on indefinitely. The current record for such a situation is 5 rulings and 5 appeals. This comes from a case 10 years ago involving a man who rammed a truck into the presidential office gate. As for Tsung here today, the questions that still remain is whether he'll be granted bail a third time, at what price, and whether prosecutors are losing steam in filing motions to appeal. Eric.
Thanks for the updates, Joyce. We will keep monitoring this hearing. That was Joyce Tsung live for us from the Taoyuan District Court. Taiwan's defense ministry says it detected 66 Chinese military aircraft and 7 naval vessels around the country since Wednesday morning. Now, 56 of those aircraft either crossed the median line of the Taiwan Strait or entered Taiwan's Air Defense Identification Zone, also known as the ADIZ. That number is tied for the highest number of incursions in a single day since the ministry began tracking such activity in 2020. The last time that many Chinese aircraft crossed into the ADIZ was October 4th, 2021, nearly 3 years ago. Now, this area is not Taiwan's sovereign airspace, but it is used by the military for defensive purposes. The military dispatched aircraft, vessels, and coastal defense systems in response to the incursions. This year's NATO Summit in Washington, D.C. has wrapped up its second day with a declaration promising more aid and eventual membership for Ukraine. Leaders also condemned China and North Korea for supplying the Russian war effort in Ukraine. Chris Gorn reports.
After the second day of this year's NATO Summit, leaders from member states and partners were invited to the White House, where U.S. President Joe Biden treated them to performances and hospitality that belied the serious events of the day. Once again, much of the summit's activity focused on the Russian invasion of Ukraine. The country's President Volodymyr Zelensky spent the day meeting with world leaders and top U.S. lawmakers, seeking more aid and a fast path to NATO membership. And the alliance made clear that it was committed to that same goal.
As Ukraine continues its vital reforms, we will continue to support them on their irreversible path to NATO membership. When the time is right, Ukraine can join without delay. It is not a question of if, but when.
NATO members pledged a further 40 billion euros to Ukraine and other additional concrete commitments of military aid.
And I'm also pleased to announce that as we speak, The transfer of F-16 jets is underway, coming from Denmark, coming from the Netherlands, and those jets will be flying in the skies of Ukraine this summer.
Concerns about Ukraine extended beyond Europe and the North Atlantic. NATO members condemned countries like North Korea and China for their role in supplying the Russian war effort.
China provides dual-use equipment, microelectronics, a lot of other tools which are enabling Russia to build the missiles, to build the bombs, to build the aircraft, to build the weapons they are using to attack Ukraine.
Security concerns are even bringing together countries like Japan and South Korea, which have had a rocky relationship in the past. As two of NATO's 4 Indo Pacific partners, the countries' leaders met on the sidelines of the summit, expressing concern about the cooperation between North Korea and Russia, and calling the security of the Atlantic and Indo Pacific inseparable. With 1 day left in this historic summit, the leaders of the world's largest security alliance and their partners are using every opportunity to affirm their ties and the commitment to the safety of its current and future allies. Delphine Chen and Chris Gorin for TaiwanPlus.
Now, with the U.S. providing military support for conflicts in Europe and the Middle East, some defense analysts have questioned Washington's ability to also engage in Asia. That's why many analysts say preventing a war in the Indo-Pacific is key to U.S. strategy. To learn more, our reporter Jaime Ocon spoke to Rob York. He's the Director of Regional Affairs at the Pacific Forum, based in Honolulu, Hawaii.
Looking at how the Asia Pacific is structured, the security environment there, can you kind of explain what threats allies and partners are facing in the Indo-Pacific?
Well, there's no doubt that the PRC is an area of concern, and it has definitely taken actions. I mean, there's a lot of focus on Taiwan, of course, but I think the area that has a lot of people concerned right now is the Philippines. So that is a country, a situation that people are going to be watching closely to see how that develops, and hopefully it doesn't cross very specific red lines, but they want to be prepared in case it does. China, of course, is not the only issue, but tailoring it around common, say, values and responses to common contingencies of varying sorts is always a more unifying tactic than singling out any particular country.
Is there a priority, though, in Asia, in the Indo-Pacific? You know, some analysts say that leading up to the U.S. election, we could see more activity coming out of North Korea in terms of weapons tests, but then there's the pacing challenge that people call, that is Taiwan Strait and South China Sea. Do you see any sort of priority that the U.S. and allies are looking to in the Indo-Pacific?
North Korea is, of course, always there, and North Korea is doing provocative things like testing missiles and testing new weapon systems and just doing things that kind of provoke the South Korean people unnecessarily. And it's doing that at a rate that in the past would have definitely made headlines and raised tensions quite a bit. But because it has become so normalized in a sense, and because China is there as the overarching pacing threat, the activities that North Korea has been up to in recent months have kind of been in the background instead. So yes, China is definitely the thing that has more people on edge at the moment.
And given the way that the world right now is kind of trying to grapple with two conflicts, one in Europe, one in the Middle East, some countries have expressed concern that, you know, a third conflict in Asia could spread the United States too thin. Do you think that concern is valid? Is that being spread across the Asia-Pacific region?
Yes, there are definitely concerns about the U.S. industrial base and its ability to support multiple conflicts at once. If there's too much of an expansion in, say, the war in the Middle East, then that would be a considerable strain on the U.S.'s resources if it were compelled to continue to support Israel in that instance, even as it supports Ukraine, especially given the political struggles that have been dividing Congress over the funding for Ukraine, and not just for them, but for other partners as well. So an additional conflict in the Indo Pacific would absolutely put a strain on that. Thankfully, it would put a strain on certain other countries that are prone to causing such conflicts, and that's why we are, for the moment, on guard, but not convinced that it's imminent.
That was Rob York from the Pacific Forum speaking to our reporter Jaime Ocon. And stay tuned the rest of this week as we continue our coverage of the RIMPAC exercises. China and Bangladesh have elevated their ties to a comprehensive strategic partnership. The move comes as Bangladeshi Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina visits Beijing, where she met Chinese President Xi Jinping and Premier Li Qiang. The two countries signed 28 agreements on trade and investment, while also agreeing to advance cooperation on the Belt and Road Initiative. Now, Beijing agreed to provide Dhaka with $137 million in economic aid, as the country is facing a foreign exchange reserve shortage. Bangladesh has traditionally maintained development partnerships with the U.S. and India, but it has grown increasingly dependent on China for economic aid. A new legal battle is brewing at Taiwan's Constitutional Court. Judges there are deciding whether to put an emergency brake on new powers that lawmakers gave themselves. John Van Trieste has this report.
The 15 justices of the Constitutional Court have a bitter dispute to resolve. The opposition-controlled legislature has voted to give itself several new powers. These include the power to invite the president, to give them an annual address followed by questions. And there's also the power to make officials testify, with fines or jail time if they refuse or don't give out information. Opponents, who say these powers erode democracy, have rallied in Taipei. And now they're taking legal action, too. The executive branch, controlled by the ruling DPP, is among those asking the court to put an emergency brake on these new powers. But lawmakers haven't actually tried to use many of them yet. So the first question is whether they should hear arguments based on hypotheticals, what lawmakers might do.
机关宪法诉讼必须就行使职权跟所适用的法规范内容抵触宪法才能申请。那我们主张总统申请不合法。
军庭要思考的事情其实很简单，就是到底违宪可不可以一下下一点点就好？我想答案是清楚的，就是不可以。
And there's also the question of whether these new powers warrant urgent action.
总统不来立法院，什么事也不能干。因为一旦总统被邀请到了国情报告，到立法院复国情报告，会发生什么事情，没有人能够担保，而这正是急迫性。
Whatever the justices decide, debate over whether these new legislative powers are constitutional doesn't end there. The battle over whether to freeze the powers temporarily is just the first move in what promises to be a lengthy legal battle. Alex Chen and John Van Trieste for TaiwanPlus.
Coming up after the break, special birthday celebrations for some very special babies. Stay tuned.
Enjoy the rich diversity of Taiwan's independent music. Taiwan Calling, every Sunday, 9:30 p.m. on TaiwanPlus.
Thank you for watching TaiwanPlus. For more stories from Taiwan and around the world, like Thailand's capital, please follow us on social media.
你经历过人生的话，你发现说，我们大部分都是暧昧的。
我自己少遇见一朵花，我可能就不是这个样子。
开始思考什么叫做一个本土性。
大声的唱出来说我是台湾人。
Welcome back. You're watching TaiwanPlus News. Now, one of Taiwan's top research institutes is celebrating its 51st anniversary. All this week on TaiwanPlus, we're taking an inside look at what it does and some of its cutting-edge innovations. What if humans could slow down the aging process? Now, that might sound like something from a science fiction movie, but scientists at a top Taiwan research facility are working on a platform that could prolong human life through cell therapy. Leslie Lau explains.
Taiwan is searching for the fountain of youth. But the search isn't a daring expedition into the unknown. It involves pipettes, experimentation, and patience. The key here is cell therapy. Cell therapy involves extracting so-called supercells from a donor and implanting them in a patient where they start to grow and multiply. Supercells may sound like a one-size-fits-all solution, but it's not that simple. The science behind it is precise, and only certain supercells can treat certain medical conditions. Currently, there isn't enough data to tell us what kind of supercells are best suited for fixing different problems.
That's where Taiwan's Industrial Technology Research Institute comes in. It's working on a database called Key Functional Cell Identity, or KFCI, to identify which supercells are most suitable for treatment.
We don't want to put in your body and you don't know what actually the treatment will make me feel better. Yeah, so that's the key point why we want to develop this platform.
So far, the database has successfully identified supercells suitable for treating 40 medical conditions. They've had the most success with treating patients with myocardial infarction or heart attack and wounds in patients with diabetes, which usually take more time to heal.
We did this one is for like you can treat or restore your organ. Yeah, so that's why right now we do this one is for the myocardial infection, and the other is like diabetes wounds.
KFCI works by identifying certain biomarkers in donor cells. This could be anything from genetic indicators to proteins. Cells with different biomarkers are tested against several medical conditions to see which combination of biomarkers shows the most promise for treatment.
And we're using not just the gene level. We're going to even the protein and can tell you how the behavior of your cell. And then you can have the way to identify who is a really super donor.
Think about it this way. The treatment to a certain medical condition is like a password. The biomarkers are the numbers and letters that make up the password. Once researchers figure out the right password for each medical condition, then they unlock an effective therapy. The potential for this technology is vast. It might even help slow down aging. As you grow older, the body wears down. But if KFCI can find the supercells that can help regenerate or even regrow organs, then it could prolong human life.
In the future, we hope it can just do the OA for the need to recover back.
And because of its life-extending potential, the team behind KFCI earned an Edison Award from the US, recognizing innovation in biomedicine.
Could be a life changer. You know, it could really, once that hits the market and you start to gather more data, you could literally change how long people live and their quality of life.
In the future, researchers plan to culture cells on computer chips for quicker analysis. Once the database is more complete, supercells can be cultured with robotics for production, bringing down costs. Taiwan is in a race to become a leader in cell therapy. But this technology is not so much about big aha moments, but rather it's about strapping down, doing the research, and finding treatments one biomarker at a time. Ryan Wu and Leslie Liao in Hsinchu for TaiwanPlus.
Be sure to tune in to TaiwanPlus again tomorrow as we continue exploring each of these innovations. Taiwan's Centers for Disease Control has put in an order for 6 million COVID vaccines in preparation for the fall and winter. 5.5 million of those are from Moderna. The rest will be from Novavax. Taiwan is currently experiencing its 6th wave of COVID. The country reported 987 cases and 99 deaths from COVID last week, a new single-week high for 2024. The CDC is predicting that this wave will hit its peak this week. Health officials are planning a 2-phase rollout for the vaccines this fall, starting in October. Alarming new statistics show over 60 children have died in murder-suicides in Taiwan in the past 6 years. Suicide prevention workers are now trying to raise awareness and help those at risk. Tiffany Wang reports.
Seeking answers for a situation she never saw coming, this woman lost her daughter and grandson in an apparent murder-suicide at the hands of her son-in-law.
女儿跟她老公平常会吵架嘛，因为
不会，就是都不会，让我们都没预警的，经济压力也不会，两个家庭，爸爸妈妈两个家庭都不错啊。
The husband is believed to have killed his wife in their apartment and suffocated their 6-month-old child in the car before taking his own life. It's part of an alarming trend, with the health ministry reporting that between 2017 and 2023, 62 children died in murder-suicides. The latest, one of 3 cases just this month. Experts point to financial troubles, health issues, and souring relationships as the main factors that lead to these killings.
可能会觉得他周遭的世界啊环境对他都非常的不利，所以他不想要把这个小孩子呢也陷入这样的这个不利的状况想要拯救自己、拯救小孩的这样的一个思考的基本的架构。
But suicide prevention workers say that a persistent stigma in Taiwan against seeking psychiatric help may make it difficult for some people to see an end to their troubles.
他自己应该知道自己不一样了，可是我觉得有些人还是排拒去寻求帮忙。
And with many warning signs hard to detect from the outside, child safety advocates say it should not just be on the individual or their families to act, and that the government needs to get involved in prevention as well.
我们认为在这些指标上面政府应该在所谓社会安全网的一个领域当中做一个广泛的宣导，我们必须要有一些资源去介入。
By making those resources more widely available and getting the conversation started on mental health, these advocates say they can get more help to people experiencing suicidal thoughts and prevent tragedies like this from happening in the future. Kamashri and Tiffany Wang for TaiwanPlus.
This remote coastal town of Sigu in Chiayi is famous for bird watching during the winter months. And in the summer, though, another flying animal captures locals' interest.
It's a very special day in the remote coastal town of Sigu in Chiayi, southern Taiwan, where a birthday party is being held for some local celebrities.
我最喜欢的动物就是蝙蝠。我们拿红灯要庆祝蝙蝠爸爸满月。
In Taiwanese tradition, babies' 1-month birthdays are celebrated with dyed red cooked eggs. On this day, about 30 people have gathered under a 4-story-high fan palm tree to celebrate these yellow bat babies. Unlike most bats which live in caves, the yellow bats here make their homes in fan palm and coconut trees. In fact, the locals here didn't even know these were bats for many years, thinking they were birds instead. But after a government campaign to raise awareness, people here have stopped using chemicals and planted more fan palm trees for the bats to roost in.
我们就开始跟长辈说你不要用农药，因为它都会在这附近觅食。然后咱大所在好，水源也好，这野生动物伊就会好，安尼咱的居住环境就会变最好的。
More than 4,000 bats now live in 9 trees around the town, easily outnumbering the town's human population of only 250. Every year, the yellow bats migrate to Taiwan in late spring to prepare for breeding. After giving birth in June, they fly to Southeast Asian countries like Vietnam, the Philippines, and Indonesia.
现在领红蛋咯。
Residents have been celebrating the baby bats' 1-month birthdays for years.
拿好红蛋哦，好，1、2、3。
Sigu is one of the few communities in Taiwan that actively conserves its bats. The animals have long been misunderstood, researchers say.
那反而像新冠病毒，大家一开始把剑齿蝙蝠，可是说真的，这么多年过后，真的没有在任何一只野外的蝙蝠身上发现过影响人类这么严重的新冠病毒。
And there are also other practical reasons to conserve the animals.
光一只蝙蝠，它可以吃3000多只的昆虫类，就是蛾啊、蚊子啊，等于是我们社区的清道夫。相对的，对社区来讲，它就是减少病虫害，然后也不会有登革热。
Locals have now developed a close bond with their friendly neighborhood bats.
伊是挂咱社区台湾的名，啊挂咱社区的名，飞出外国，甲咱介绍咱社区，佮带这侪朋友回来呢。长辈他们就会觉得很骄傲哦，袂输伊嘛是咱的囝共款安尼。
蝙蝠如果不保育的话，它的数量会越来越少。蝙蝠减少，我会很伤心。
Experts say teaching young people about bats is key to changing human impressions of these animals, helping humans and bats live happily in harmony together. Luffy Lee, Pichi Zhuang, and Saini Chi for TaiwanPlus.
Baseball star Zhang Yucheng has signed the biggest contract in Taiwan's professional league history. His 3.5-year contract with the Fubon Guardians is worth $2.8 million. Zhang is hailed as the best hitter in Taiwan's baseball history. He played in the U.S. Major League for 5 years, setting several hitting records for Taiwanese players, including 20 home runs. Zhang is set to play his first game with the Guardians on Friday night against the Uni Lions. Thanks for joining us here on TaiwanPlus News. Finally, fight the summer heat with these animals at the Prague Zoo, plunging into ice to cool down. I'm Eric Gao, and we'll see you next time.